As COVID cases spike, some businesses want customers to show proof of vaccination.
We still have people who aren't vaccinated to wear masks, but there's no way to know who is and who is not vaccinated.
Some people are pushing back.
Why should we have to share that information when you can't ask someone what their disability is?
How that conflict is unfolding in Michigan this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Weekday afternoons at 4 on 1019 WDET.
WDET is supported by the music of Star Wars, performed by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra at Meadowbrook Amphitheater, Friday, August 13th. Music from the Skywalker Saga and anthology films Under the Stars. Tickets and more at 313presents.com.
That sounds something awesome, folks.
This
Go
is
see.
Fresh Air.
Welcome to the stream, folks. Let's go for a ride.
Well, with his father, Mohammed bin Laden, who founded this, basically came to Saudi Arabia in 1930, just before this huge gush of petrodollars landed on the kingdom, and he definitely kind of took advantage of that to become
Cooling the phone down, folks. Trying to.
in Saudi.
Give us a minute. Give me a minute.
His father was, I think,
Gotta keep an eye on things. I don't need to be speeding.
Laden had 54 and bin Laden's father married his mother in Syria when she was a teenager. Bin Laden's father was around 50 when they got married. And bin Laden barely saw his father. It looks like he only met with his father 5 times in his entire life. His father died when bin Laden was 10. Bin Laden appears to have had only one-on-one meeting with his father. And so, the parents divorced when bin Laden was only 2. So his relationship with his father was non-existent, really. But he did believe that he was kind of fulfilling an important mission of his father. His father supposedly said that one of his sons would
Blow it up. That's what
fight
we
the
can.
jihad, holy war, and bin Laden felt that he was kind of fulfilling his father's wishes. His relationship with his mother was very warm. He would kiss her hands, he would make small talk with her, compliment her on her cooking. He always remained very, very close to her, even when he was on the run in Sudan and Afghanistan in the 90s. He would communicate with her to the extent that he could. So he had a very warm relationship with his mother.
So he grew up in this family that had enormous wealth, and some wealthy Middle Eastern families who would send their children to be educated in Western countries, many in the United States, and many were known for a very lavish lifestyle. There's a photo you have in the book. It's really this remarkable photo of, I guess, maybe 20 or so members of the bin Laden family on vacation in Sweden in 1971. You want to describe this photo and why you included it?
This is a pretty well-known photo of the bin Laden
You gotta be
family on
kidding me.
vacation. I
That
think there were
much?
23 bin Ladens.
Just
It was
torque on the engine. It's
one
gonna
of them
make
named
that
Osama bin Laden. There's something
flip and
about it.
flop.
But the larger point
I
is
hope I
that
went the
the
right
son of
way.
bin Laden, who took over the family, the oldest brother, took over the family business when his father, Mohammed bin Laden, died in a plane crash. He was a very westernized guy. He bought a house in Orlando, kind of an estate. He basically played the guitar. He played Where Have All the Flowers Gone and these kinds of 1960s hits. So he was extremely Americanized, as were so many members of the family. And in this photo, I think the reason I included was, all the women are not covered. They're, the guys have got all these kind of 1970s hippies kind of outfits on. I think it just shows that, one of the interesting puzzles is bin Laden had 54 siblings. None of them chose the path that bin Laden did. And so if one of the questions I'm trying to answer in the book is why did he go down this path, this photo I think is kind of an interesting kind of counterpoint which shows that nothing's inevitable in any of our lives. None of the 22 siblings who are in this picture of Osama bin Laden, none of them chose the life of jihad. In fact, a quarter of bin Laden's siblings were educated in the United States. They owed their money, their fortune in many ways, to the marriage of convenience between the United States and the Saudi kingdom, which is based on the oil business. Most of the family were not at all anti-American.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The kids in this picture, they got bell bottoms and sideburns and all this stuff. Osama bin Laden worked for the family construction company a lot. He described that he would actually drive bulldozers. Do we know why he turned so resolutely towards religion?
That's a puzzle. And I mean, I try not to do much psychology in the book because I'm not a psychologist, and I'm interested in how Bin Laden got to where he became. Answering the why is kind of a more complex question, but in his own account to his family, he said the death of his father turned him maybe more religious. His father died in a plane crash.
Well, that doesn't matter.
Bin Laden told his family members that he began studying the Quran. At a certain point, he memorized the entire Quran, which is quite a feat of memory, as there are 6,000 or so verses in the Quran. So I sort of take Bin Laden in his own account when he told his family, his father.
So much fun.
Even though he really spent no time with his father, he felt close to his father. He was always kind of a solemn, brave kid. The death of his father made him more solemn and more brave. Turned him towards religion. By the time he's a teenager, as I recount in the book, he's fasting twice a week. He's saying an extra set of prayers that is not required in the Quran.
Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for the thumbs up. Welcome to the stream.
As a teenager, it's kind of unusual.
A little bit of overcast. It's Michigan, folks.
To play.
Yeah.
Songs about Palestine.
Yeah.
Not the sort of typical kind of behavior that we see in a teenager. So I think the death of his father made him more religious, and he kept going down that path.
The Russian invasion of Afghanistan was clearly a transformative event in his life. He would have been in his early 20s then, and he had money, right? His share of heroin, and so he spent a lot of it assisting the Afghan resistance forces. Eventually goes there and becomes a military leader himself. He wants to organize Arabs who were motivated to come in and drive the Russians out of Afghanistan into a military force. And most of those who were fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan were not against them.
Woo! At least man's going the right direction, folks. Traffic, they're backing it up on 23 North.
As a military.
Yep.
And how did he spin it? How did he play it? Creating his image.
I mean, at the height of the war against the Soviets, there might have been 300 so-called Afghan Arabs on the battlefield. Meanwhile, there were somewhere between 175,000 to 250,000 Afghans that were fighting the Soviets. So the Arabs had virtually no impact in any, strategically or even operationally on the war in Afghanistan. But in Bin Laden's mind, there was no doubt that he himself fought with almost suicidal bravery against the Soviets in 1987. He and some of his kind of followers set up a military camp right near a Soviet base, and they fought for 2 or 3 weeks against Soviet special forces.
Welcome to the stream.
Bin Laden set up this military camp. It didn't have any strategic impact on the war. The Afghans don't really need help with fighting. But in Bin Laden's mind, his Arabs, the people, his followers, helped defeat a superpower. I think this was absolutely delusional. One of many delusions he had. But it was a delusion that he felt very strongly, and it was shared by others because, journalists came to cover Bin Laden, including Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered by the Saudis in 2018 in Istanbul. But Jamal Khashoggi was the first mainstream journalist to cover Bin Laden and wrote a pretty massive piece in the English documenting Bin Laden and his efforts. And bear in mind that there were several thousand members of the Saudi royal family, none of whom were fighting in Afghanistan. It was Bin Laden, a member of a prominent Saudi family, fighting himself personally against the Soviets, and recruiting people to fight against the Soviets. And so it was kind of a heroic story. And there's no doubt that Bin Laden fought with some bravery, but what effect did it have on the larger world? The answer is virtually nothing.
You're right that he formed Al-Qaeda. There are actually documents that show this in 1988. Moves to Syria and operates there, and eventually was forced to leave because he was creating problems with the Saudi regime. They exert pressure to get to force him to
better.
And he begins planning mass attacks through large numbers of civilians. Do we know why he turns that approach?
You know, the why question is very difficult in history. You know, why Bin Laden went down the path he did. I try and explain to the reader how did he get there, because I think how is perhaps a more clear way of explaining it. So I think there was nothing inevitable about how, you know, Bin Laden, this shy religious teenager, then becomes a leader of a group dedicated to mass murder. There were a series of events that kept pushing him further and further down the path of radicalization, and each one of them, you know, if he, you know, he could have chosen a different path at several points in his life. But the introduction of American troops into Saudi Arabia turned his sort of latent anti-Americanism into kind of a passionate hatred of the United States. And he decided that you know, the best approach to getting the United States out of Saudi Arabia was to use violence. And he was influenced by the fact that in 1983, Hezbollah attacked the Marine barracks in Beirut, killed 241 American service personnel. And you know, the Reagan administration pulled out of Lebanon as a result. So he saw that as sort of a model. He thought that with sufficient military pressure on the United States, that the United States would pull out of Saudi Arabia and other places in the Middle East where American troops are based. That, of course, was a delusion. It didn't work.
We need to take another break here. Let me reintroduce you. We're speaking with journalist and author Peter Bergen. His new book is The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. This is Fresh Air.
Join WDET for an Artist Next Door Art Talk. I'm Ryan Patrick Hooper, and I'll chat with two Dearborn artists, potter and woodworker Daniel Michelson and illustrator Dania Sajuni at the Black Box Coffee Shop and Gallery in Dearborn Thursday, August 5th on their patio from 6 to 8 p.m. You can get directions and more information. Plus, let us know if you're coming at WDET.org/events.
Made possible by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and supported by Founders Brewing Company and MGM Grand Detroit.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Amazon Studios with the new documentary Val. Using never-before-seen personally shot footage from his film sets and home movies, Val Kilmer takes viewers on a journey through his complicated life. Starts Friday on Prime Video. And from the law firm Cooley LLP, with offices in the U.S., Europe, and Asia, Cooley advises entrepreneurs, investors, financial institutions, and established companies around the world, where innovation meets the law.
Welcome,
This is Fresh Air, and we're speaking with journalist and author Peter Bergen. He's written several books.
RVs on the side there, fifth wheel. Oh, it's like a storage place.
His new book is The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden. A lot was written about the Bush administration's failure to respond to warnings about Al-Qaeda before the 9/11 attacks. That's been written about a lot. You've taken a really close look at it. As you looked at this material, should they have been more aware of what the intelligence community was coming up with?
I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, the volume of strategic warning from what's the purpose of the CIA is to provide strategic warning to policymakers. And the CIA was sending all sorts of classified warnings during the summer of 2001 about the threat from bin Laden. Of course, they didn't know, there was no information about where and when this attack might happen, but, this is the famous August the 6th presidential daily briefing, which was titled Bin Laden Determined to Attack the U.S. That was briefed to President Bush at his ranch in Texas. He didn't really do anything about it, nor did it, the group of people around him just didn't consider bin Laden and Al-Qaeda a real threat. They were concerned about Iraq. They were concerned about other issues. The CIA did make one quite major error, which was they knew that two members of Al-Qaeda were living in the United States. They didn't inform the FBI in any meaningful manner or watch list these guys until just a couple of weeks before 9/11. So they said there was a tactical mistake that the CIA made. Quite a number of CIA employees were aware of this information, didn't act on it. But from a strategic point of view, the CIA provided plenty of warning in the summer of 2001 that Al-Qaeda was planning some kind of major attack against American interests.
And then, of course, after 9/11, there was the invasion of Afghanistan, and the United States States relied on alliances with Afghan warriors to attack the Taliban, and there was a point where Osama bin Laden was holed up in the caves of the remote Tora Bora region, which he knew so well. There was heavy bombing. But he managed to slip away, and the Bush administration was criticized for this. What do you make of this? Did they have the capacity to track him down and prevent him from fleeing?
Yeah, I spent a fair amount of time in Tora Bora, which is up, mountains go up to 14,000 feet. It's 6 miles by 6 miles. It's on the border of Pakistan, a very porous border. So, the fact is, it's not an easy place to kind of cordon off, but the United States never tried. And that, to me, it's surprising. The World Trade Center pile of debris was literally still smoking on December 12th, 2001, which is the day that bin Laden escaped from Tora Bora. It's also the same day that Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was getting briefed about the future Iraq war plans by the Pentagon. And to me, that sort of speaks for itself. Here is the architect of 9/11 escaping, and Donald Rumsfeld is getting briefed on the Iraq war plans. So that shows you where their head was at. And there was plenty of information well known at the time that bin Laden was at Tora Bora, but no will to get him. There were more journalists at the Battle of Tora Bora, by my count, than there were American soldiers. There were about 100 journalists covering the battle, and about 70 American soldiers in total.
I hate to ask you to play what if, but yeah, what if bin Laden had been killed or captured then right after 9/11? How might the war of terror have played out differently?
I think it's a great what if. I think a few things. One, I think it would have been harder to make the case to go to war against Iraq, because part of the case that was made by the Bush administration that somehow Iraq and Al Qaeda were allied, which wasn't true. But if bin Laden was already gone, the supposed alliance between Al Qaeda and Iraq would have been much less relevant. I think if Al Qaeda, if bin Laden been captured, perhaps it would have been easier to make a peace deal with the Taliban if Al Qaeda was no longer so relevant. It would have been a sort of a punctuation mark to sort of say, we went to get bin Laden, we got him. He went on to lead Al Qaeda for another 10 years. He went on to be an inspirational figure to, jihadists around the world. Al Qaeda itself went on to carry out attacks in the West. For instance, the London attack of July 7th, 2005, which killed 52 commuters on the London transportation system. All these things might not have happened if bin Laden had been captured or killed at the Battle of Tora Bora. Of course, he wasn't. He slipped away at 11 o'clock at night on December 12th, 2001. He went on to live for another decade.
One subject which I think you do address pretty rigorously is the question of whether coercive interrogation techniques, which were adopted by U.S. forces, were effective in fighting Al Qaeda.
Yeah, and I use the word coercive interrogation because I don't use the word torture. Torture is no one can deny that coercive interrogation techniques were used by the CIA. Some people might debate whether they amount to torture or not. So I rather than using the word torture, I use the word coercive interrogations. They were, of course, largely used by the CIA. I conclude, based on all the facts that are known, that they were pretty ineffective in terms of finding bin Laden. The CIA says that they were useful in eliciting certain information, but if you look at the 5 key members of Al Qaeda who were asked about bin Laden and who were subjected to coercive interrogation techniques, they all provided false information about bin Laden's whereabouts or no information. And so it's the CIA sort of, certain members of the CIA, former members of the CIA, defend the coercive interrogation techniques, saying, well, they did work in some cases, even though they didn't provide bin Laden's location. The fact that they were lying about bin Laden's location when they provided useful information about other questions sort of proves that they worked. I don't, to me, there's a kind of logic flow problem with that response. Now, there is an important caveat here. One of the members of Al Qaeda who was interrogated in Guantanamo, and he was not interrogated in the CIA interrogation program, and he gave up some useful information about the courier who was known as Kuwaiti, the bodyguard that led to bin Laden. But I can tell you that the story of finding bin Laden was an Agatha Christie story. It wasn't sort of there was one particular detainee who suddenly had all the information. It was really a series of some information from detainees, some of which was found through just conventional interrogation techniques before they were brought into the purview of the CIA. And then there were, signals intercepts, and there were information from foreign governments, and there was all sorts of other breaks in the case that led eventually to the compound in Abbottabad where bin Laden was hidden.
We need to take a break here. Let me reintroduce you. We are speaking with Peter Bergen. His new book is The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. This is Fresh Air.
Ports are backed up and trucks can only carry so much of the stuff that we import. What, then, to do?
If we don't have enough goods shipped by rail, if the congestion continues, the prices will be higher.
I'm Kyle Brisdall. Traffic jams everywhere in this economy. We will have that story for you, the numbers from Wall Street as well, next time on Marketplace.
Marketplace, this evening at 6 on 1019 WDET. WDET is a community service of Wayne State University, a premier public research university in the heart of Detroit.
This is Fresh Air, and our guest is Peter Bergen. He's a journalist and author who's written several books about Al-Qaeda and other jihadist movements. His new book is a biography of Osama bin Laden called The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden. You wrote recently that President Biden's speech explaining his decision to withdraw from Afghanistan was the worst of his presidency. It seems clear that the Taliban is advancing. I guess the question is on the other side, is it effective for the United States to be in a place like this? Troops that don't speak the local languages and don't know the local customs can make mistakes, and there's a long history of billions spent on projects that don't get much done. What sort of future would there be for Afghanistan with a continued U.S. presence?
We're still in South Korea 75 years plus after the end of the Korean War, and there are 25,000 plus American troops there. Now, South Korea is not Afghanistan, but South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world at the end of the Korean War in 1953, and now it's one of the richest. Afghanistan is in South Korea, but the point is that under our an American national security umbrella, any number of countries have done quite well, whether that's South Korea or Germany or Japan. And I think Afghanistan, we know what went wrong, it's well known, but there were many things that went right. Girls could go to school, women could have jobs, there's a very healthy independent media with literally hundreds of TV and radio stations in Afghanistan. Child mortality rates have plummeted. I mean, there are a lot of things that have gone right. And by the 20 years is not that long a time for real change to take place. I mean, the good thing is that there was a whole new generation of Afghans. It's one of the youngest countries in the world. I think 70% of the population is under the age of 25. There is no nostalgia amongst this group, really, to go back to the Taliban. So the Taliban, I don't think, will be able to take over Afghanistan. My concern is that there's going to be a very brutal civil war that will make the previous war that has been going on in Afghanistan since 9/11 look like a croquet match by comparison.
This question of whether Al-Qaeda and the Taliban were, what their relationship has come up over the years. I mean, Osama bin Laden had plenty of trouble with the leaders of the Taliban when he was there. Did any of the documents that were captured in the raid in Pakistan tell us more about the relationship between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban?
They did, and one of the documents is bin Laden sent a letter to Mullah Omar, the leader of the Taliban, just months before bin Laden was killed, in which he sort of said, hang in there because the Americans are planning to leave, and it was a letter basically designed to sort of buck up Mullah Omar's spirits, and there were also other letters to members of the Taliban from leaders of Al-Qaeda. There was also proof that they were funding elements of the Taliban. They also planned joint military operations with the Taliban, including one against Bagram Air Force Base, which is this huge American Air Force base in central Afghanistan, which the raid carried out by one branch of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda happened in 2010. So I think there's plenty of information in the documents that were released from the Abbottabad compound that showed that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban remained having cordial relations, that Al-Qaeda was financing elements of the Taliban, was instructing elements of the Taliban about what to do. They were cooperating on joint operations. And then, fast forward to today, the United Nations in June released a report about relations between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, describing them as, quote, very close. They even said that the relations have got stronger. So there was a lot of wishful thinking about the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The Trump administration started peace negotiations with the Taliban in 2018, which were predicated on the idea Al-Qaeda and the Taliban had separated, would separate, and that was all nonsense and a charade. And I think that we'll see that the Taliban are, recruiting foreign fighters from around the Muslim world. That the split screen on 9/11 will be the Taliban, taking over chunks of Afghanistan using American military equipment that they've seized, and reading the names of the victims of 9/11 at the World Trade Center site. And I can't imagine a split screen, but I think that is likely what we will see.
Peter Bergen, thank you so much for speaking with us again.
Thank you.
Peter Bergen is a national security analyst for CNN. He's also vice president for global studies and fellows at the think tank New America and a professor at Arizona State University. His new book is The Rise and Fall of Osama bin Laden. On tomorrow's show, we'll talk with the New Yorker's Jane Mayer about the national conservative groups that funded the ballot audit in Arizona, claiming the vote was fraudulent. In her new article, The Big Money Behind the Big Lie, Mayer writes that those wealthy conservatives now want to let state legislators overturn elections. I hope you can join us. Fresh Air's executive producer is Danny Miller. Our engineer and technical director is Audrey Bentham. Our interviews and reviews are produced and edited by Amy Sallet, Phyllis Myers, Sam Brigger, Lauren Krenzel, Heidi Saman, Teresa Madden, Anne-Marie Baldonado, Thea Challoner, Seth Kelly, Kayla Lattimore, and Joel Wolfram. Our producer of digital media is Molly Seavey-Nesper. Roberta Shorrock directs the show. For Terry Gross, I'm Dave Davies.
Why would you get in front of me?
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Indeed, a hiring platform offering 135 skills tests to help businesses connect with candidates who align with their job requirements. Learn more at Indeed.com/credit. And from the Walton Family Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems to improve lives today and benefit future generations. More information at waltonfamilyfoundation.org.
Gee, guys, do you know who the Walton Foundation is? Comment if you know.
Should help communities thrive. Today, First Merchants Bank continues to focus on solutions. Working together, they create them. Learn more at firstmerchants.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
This is 101.9 WDET FM, Detroit's NPR station, your connection to news, music, and conversation. I'm Russ McNamara. Good afternoon. All Things Considered is coming up next. Traffic is sponsored by the Belle Isle Art Fair this weekend on the island near Scott Fountain.
The Belle Isle Art Fair.
14 westbound at Goffredson Road, there's a crash block at the right lane. Traffic is backed up to Beck Road. Expect some delays northbound 75 from Kniff, basically all the way up through I-696. Southbound 75 is slow between 14 Mile and McNichols. Clear skies tonight, a low of 63. Sunny tomorrow, a high of 86. Partly sunny and breezy on Friday, highs in the upper 80s. It's 4 o'clock.
As we move through these coming days, you'll continue to see a strong and bipartisan show of support that gets our bill across the finish line. We're pretty excited about this.
Senator Kirsten Sinema on the infrastructure bill she helped broker, and what's at stake if Democrats lose the House or Senate in the next election.
For Wednesday, August 4th, it's All Things Considered.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. This hour is ICE targeting activists who are working to help immigrants.
Some of the stories of activist retaliation have previously been told piecemeal, but I think it's clear that this is a broad and national problem.
Also, we head to Michigan, where some businesses are asking customers to show proof of vaccination.
We still ask people who weren't vaccinated to wear masks, but there's no way to know who is and who is not vaccinated. And in reality, most people aren't wearing masks.
And the sexual misconduct probe into New York Governor Andrew Cuomo raises questions about his brother, the CNN anchor.
Fresh News. Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. This is firing after President Biden called on his state and Texas to help promote public health measures in the coronavirus resurgence. NPR's Greg Allen reports DeSantis criticized Biden for promoting what he called lockdown policies and a biomedical security state.
Florida has been at the center of a resurgence of the virus, and hospitalizations for COVID-19 are at an all-time high. Asked about policies in Texas and Florida, where school districts are banned from requiring students to wear face masks, Biden said Tuesday if governors aren't going to help, they should, quote, get out of the way. At a news conference in North Florida, Governor DeSantis responded.
Well, let me tell you this. If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it.
DeSantis accuses Biden of not doing enough to secure the southern border. The Florida governor says it's up to parents, not public health experts, to decide whether their children will wear face masks. Greg Allen, NPR News, Miami.
Millions of tenants behind on their rent and at risk of eviction in this pandemic are waiting to see if the CDC's new temporary evictions freeze withstands legal challenges. This order targets the most populous areas with substantial or high levels of COVID-19 cases. That covers much of the country. Here's Asma Khalid has more.
The reason the administration is doing this is kind of twofold. One is they've said that they felt there was this moral imperative to act. But secondly, because they feel specifically that scientific evidence has shown that people who are at risk of being evicted are also at a higher risk of contracting the Delta variant because there are lower vaccination rates in those areas.
NPR's Asma Khalid reporting. The government's nationwide moratorium expired over the weekend. The latest order would run through October 3rd. It buys time for the administration to get assistance to tenants and landlords who depend on rental income. Federal prosecutors have charged 9 people with firearms offenses for allegedly peddling guns from Georgia to New York. NPR's Ryan Lucas reports the case comes as the Justice Department seeks to crack down on firearms trafficking.
The 9 defendants have been charged with conspiracy to commit firearms offenses, gun trafficking, and other crimes. According to an indictment unsealed in New York, one of the defendants, Georgia resident Devon Wilson, acted as a straw purchaser to buy at least 87 guns from licensed dealers in Georgia and then coordinated their delivery to individuals in New York, some of whom were legally barred from having a gun. Prosecutors say some of the weapons purchased by Wilson were found at crime scenes in New York. The Biden Justice Department has launched strike forces in 5 major metropolitan areas, including New York City, to try to combat gun trafficking and violent crime. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average closes the day down more than 300 points, or nearly 1%, at 34,792. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, for protecting everything under one roof by bundling home and auto. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Traffic reports made possible by the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation.
It's 4:04. Good afternoon. I'm Russ McNamara with news from WDET. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is responding to widespread flooding that occurred throughout southeast Michigan. FEMA officials say $50 million is available for people in Washtenaw and Wayne counties, with more on the way. In the weeks since the June storms, some people have been denied federal aid. Disaster coordinator Scott Burgess says they should keep trying.
Get to one of the disaster recovery centers and bring that paperwork with. We'll help read through it. We'll help give some guidance, just to assist and clarify. Because it's written, it's in a technical manner. But we're here to assist, and we have folks, if they can't, we can possibly have come visit it where they live.
FEMA is setting up recovery centers at the Golightly Career Technical Center on Detroit's east side and the Kemeny Recreation Center downriver. Federal officials also have sites in Dearborn, Dearborn Heights, and Garden City. Former Deputy Mayor Anthony Adams will challenge Mayor Mike Duggan for his seat in Detroit's upcoming general election. Adams scored roughly 10% of the mayoral vote, while Duggan earned more than 70%. Adams is positioning himself as a reform candidate. He says housing security is a key priority, especially after the recent flood.
We're in a situation now where people are literally afraid every time it rains because of the mismanagement and neglect and how they've handled water soaring in the city of Detroit.
Hamtramck's current mayor and a political newcomer were the winners in last night's primary there. WDET's Sasha Ryan has more.
Karen Mayeski is running for a 5th term as mayor, but Amr Ghalib, a doctor, took the lead in yesterday's primary. The two move on to the November election. Community activist Asim Rahman and city council member Saad Al-Masmari were also on the ballot. If Ghalib were to win in November, it would be the first time in the history of what is now Michigan's most diverse city that its mayor was not Polish. I'm Sasha Ryan, WDET News.
Clear skies tonight, a low of 63. Sunny tomorrow, a high of 86.
From NPR News, it's All Things Considered. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. For renters facing eviction in the U.S., things have looked bleak for the last few months.
I truly expect the 10 million or so families that may be facing the threat of housing instability in this country to begin being evicted.
That's housing attorney Lee Camp in St. Louis, who I spoke with back in May. At that point, the Supreme Court had ruled that the CDC did not have the authority to extend an eviction moratorium. This past Saturday, things looked even worse for renters when the moratorium expired. And now the CDC has issued a new moratorium. It applies to areas of the country dealing with a substantial spread of the coronavirus. And attorney Lee Camp is back with us once again. Good to have you here.
Hey, great to talk to you, Artie.
So you're in St. Louis. Do you know whether it qualifies as having a substantial spread of the virus?
We do. We actually are in a high spread area, and the moratorium now covers high or substantial areas that are dealing with the spread of the virus.
I imagine that comes as some relief to your clients. What have you been hearing from them since the moratorium expired on Saturday before this new one was in place?
Oh, it's fantastic news for my clients. Certainly, Monday was a very long day when I was in the office and had to call clients and say, we have to get ready at this point that the moratorium is gone and that you will likely face the threat of eviction within the next week or two. It's been much nicer making the phone calls on the back end to let them know that this extension or new moratorium, however you want to look at it, is in place and that they are protected. Now we turn our focus to rental assistance.
Do you hear from them that landlords are becoming more impatient, more aggressive?
Yeah, there's a mix. Certainly we have landlords that are frustrated by the situation. We have landlords that are more understanding than others, and that we're all going through this moment in time together. But there is certainly kind of a mounting tension between my clients and even myself and the landlords and their attorneys at this point.
This new moratorium is more limited than the last one. So do you have a sense of how exactly it will work? Like, who will determine whether a given part of the country at any given moment qualifies or not?
Yeah, I think that is the one big question that housing advocates are asking themselves right now. Certainly, the moratorium as it stands today and per the announcement covers about 90% of this country. However, it is very inextricably intertwined with public health data in specific counties around the nation. And we're all waiting to see, hopefully we'll get guidance on that, or our local governments, our local courts, someone will step in and say, we will monitor this to ensure that this moratorium can be complied with. But it is an outstanding question, one that we're very interested in getting answers to.
You mentioned that the next task is to get your clients rental assistance. And the last time we spoke, you talked about how little of the $46 billion that Congress had allocated was being distributed to tenants and landlords. From what you can see right now, has that changed?
It really is a mixed bag. So certain places in Missouri, so for example, St. Louis County about 8 miles from where I am right now, has really ramped up their distribution of rental assistance funds. We've heard numbers like 13 days from applying for rental assistance to actually receiving that check through that program. Other programs are still slow. I mean, there has been a lot of work to kind of relax the bureaucratic requirements that families go through to make this money more accessible, to physically have locations where people can walk in and apply. And we're encouraged to see that and see these timelines dropping, but we still have some work to do, and there's no better time than right now with this new moratorium in place to do that work.
Although there are questions about whether this new moratorium will stand up to legal challenges, here's what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said earlier today.
I would tell you that regardless of what is decided by any court, if anything is decided by any court, this is not a permanent solution.
Not a permanent solution. Just briefly, what does that mean for your client?
Yeah, it means that they remain in a precarious position over the next 2 months. Certainly, policies are that permanent solution, and we hope that people are listening and learning from this experience now. But for my clients, it means monitoring these daily changes to the law and really updating them on the situation as it evolves in front of all of us.
That is Attorney Lee Camp, Senior Staff Attorney at Arch City Defenders in St. Louis. Thanks for talking to us once again.
Yeah, thank you, Ari.
In the weeks and months that we have been hearing about the $1 trillion infrastructure deal, we have also heard a lot about Joe Manchin, moderate Democratic senator from West Virginia. Questions like, how high is he willing to go? Ultimately, what would it take to get him to sign on to the package? Well, we're going to speak now with another moderate Democrat who was equally central to the deal, Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema. Her answers to those questions were just as important. Sinema led talks for the Democrats, and she helped deliver that rarest of things in Washington, a bipartisan deal. Well, as a final Senate vote nears, she joins me to talk about how they got here, what might happen next, and all things considered. Well, you are in the home stretch on this bill. I gather senators are offering amendments on the floor right now, and I want to ask about this bipartisan group of senators, 22 of you, I guess, who've pledged you're going to stick together through this process, come what may. How's it going?
Well, it's policies in our bill. We've been moving forward on amendments, and so far we've been thrilled to receive the support of 2/3 of the Senate, which has shown broad and bipartisan support. And the debate we're having on the proposal right now is showing the strength of that coalition, and we're excited that as we move through these coming days, you'll continue to see a strong and bipartisan show of support that gets our bill across the finish line. We're pretty excited about this.
It's just striking listening to you how rare it is to speak to a senator from either party who tells me things are going really well and it's all really bipartisan. I mean, it's so rare. Does it create a kind of roadmap for other areas where you could collaborate with Republicans, do you think?
Well, those who know me know that that's the way I've always operated. And so, I tell folks, I know that bipartisanship sounds outdated to many pundits, but the difficult work of crossing party lines, collaborating, compromising, that's what's expected at home in Arizona. And I also believe that it is still the best way to identify realistic solutions, right? So what we see happening in our political discourse today are these all or nothing political battles, but they typically result in nothing, no action at all. Or you'll see policies that reverse back and forth as administrations and party control changes hands. And that type of whipsaw action isn't good for our country.
Your approach has come under some criticism, a lot of criticism, including from your fellow Democrats in Congress. New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in a tweet, accused you of tanking your party's investment on childcare, climate change, and infrastructure. She accused you of excluding members of color from negotiations. May I ask you to respond to that?
Well, I'm not going to, because I am laser focused on advancing our legislation, which will be a historic investment for Arizona and American families, businesses, and communities. So what I will do is talk about the work that we've done. We worked for long hours over many, many months. This was a broadly bipartisan group, 22 Democrats and Republicans in the Senate working together with a shared commitment to find common ground and get this done. And, it's easy to launch criticisms and political attacks, As folks know, I don't do that. But what I do is stay absolutely focused on getting solutions done that impact the people of our country.
Well, and I'm not interested in wasting time on political attacks and spats back and forth inter-party or across party lines. But the bigger question of what is at stake here is part of what I suspect is on Representative Ocasio-Cortez's mind. It's not just immediate legislation before you, but democratic control of Congress. I mean, the question that's being raised is whether your position could risk losing Democratic majorities in the House and Senate. Does it?
Well, what I'm really interested in doing is making a difference for the people of our state, the state of Arizona, and for our country. And the legislation we're working on and expect to finish this week will make a difference in the everyday lives of the American people. That's
of course, but you can't get that done. You can't get what you want to get done without Democrats controlling Congress, no?
Well, I think I could. I mean, this is a bipartisan effort. We are working really well together in getting this done. The second thing that we'll be doing after we do this bill is having a conversation about the other priorities that President Biden has talked about in earlier conversations and speeches. And that's the budget resolution that we'll get to after we do this legislation. And when we turn to that effort, I'll give it 100% of my full attention and commitment to the challenge that we're facing, to work hard with my colleagues to find common ground and to make a difference in the lives of everyday people across this country. And we take those pieces of legislation one at a time.
Of Congress, yes? This is something you'd like to see continue?
Well, I am one of those, so yes, absolutely.
It doesn't sound like you're particularly worried about that side of the calculus here.
Well, what I'm worried about is getting stuff done. And my experience has been, in the close to 20 years that I've been serving in public office, is that when you put your head down and do the work and get stuff done, that the constituents you serve see that, and they choose to send you back to your current office, or in my case, to send me to higher office over the course of the nearly 20 years that I've been serving. And so I guess what I would say is the proof is in the pudding. If you do the work and deliver results for the people that you represent, they'll continue to send you back to do that job.
Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, a Democrat. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Senator.
It's been a pleasure.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
It's 4:18. I'm Russ McNamara. Good afternoon. Coming up next on All Things Considered, retaliation by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, not against immigrants, but the people trying to help immigrants. Plus, a story from Michelle Jokish-Polo here in Michigan about some businesses requiring proof of vaccination. How that's going over. Spoiler alert, not well for some people. We'll take a quick break. Come back for
WDET is a community service of Wayne State University, a premier public research university in the heart of Detroit.
Ports are backed up and trucks can only carry so much of the stuff that we import. What then to do?
If we don't have enough goods shipped by rail, if the congestion continues, the prices will be high.
I'm Kai Risdal. Traffic jams everywhere in this economy. We will have that story for you, the numbers from Wall Street as well, next time on Marketplace.
Marketplace, this evening at 6 on 101.9 WDET.
WDET Traffic is sponsored by the Michigan School of Psychology in Farmington Hills, offering a certificate in applied behavior analysis. More at msp.edu. 94 eastbound to Lodge, there's a crash. Traffic is backed up to I-96. Looking at some delays northbound 75 from Kniff all the way up through 696. It's down to one lane at 696. Southbound 75 is slow between 14 Mile and 11 Mile. M14 eastbound is a little bit slow once you get around Beck Road. Clear skies tonight, a low of 63. Sunny tomorrow, a high of 86. Partly sunny and breezy on Friday, highs in the upper 80s. Sunny with showers and storms on Saturday, a high of 87. It's 4:20.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Procter & Gamble, maker of Align Probiotic, a daily supplement to support digestive health, containing a probiotic strain developed by gastroenterologists with 20 years of research. More at alignprobiotics.com. And from C3 AI, C3 AI software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable problems. C3 AI. This is Enterprise AI.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Sometimes the battle over immigration policy gets personal. Immigrant advocates claim they've been targeted for retaliation by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement because of their activism. Now they're looking to the Biden administration to do something about it. NPR's Joel Rose reports.
For years, activist Maru Moraviel-Pando has organized hunger strikes to protest conditions at an immigrant detention center in Tacoma, Washington.
So repeat with me, freedom is not negotiable. Freedom is not negotiable.
That was in 2017. A few months later, ICE placed Moraviel-Pando in deportation proceedings. Moraviel-Pando is an undocumented immigrant. She's been living in Washington state for more than 20 years with no criminal record. To her, this was all about intimidation.
It was very clear that ICE didn't like my work. And they believed that putting me in deportation proceedings would impact negatively our image.
If ICE was trying to silence Moraviel-Pando, it didn't work. She went to court and obtained internal documents and emails from ICE. In one of those emails, a high-ranking ICE officer describes Moraviel-Pando as an instigator. Another officer suggests that trying to deport her might, quote, take away some of her clout.
I even had to look up that word. I didn't know that word in English. Honestly, I was like, what are they talking about?
For immigrants' rights advocates, those emails are vindication of what they've been saying for years, that ICE is deliberately retaliating against them for their work. ICE consistently denies this charge, but advocates say there's a growing body of evidence that cannot be ignored, and they want the Biden administration to put an end to the practice.
This report exposes how ICE has targeted organizers and leaders of each group.
Sejal Zota is the legal director of Just Futures Law. It's one of several organizations behind a new report documenting allegations of retaliation from across the country, Texas, North Carolina, Illinois, and Vermont, where immigrant advocates say they've been spied on, intimidated, and even deported for their activism.
Some of the stories of activist retaliation have previously been told piecemeal, but documenting the accounts of groups from around the country, I think it becomes clear that this is a broad and national problem.
ICE denies retaliating against anyone. The agency says it is simply enforcing immigration law against people who are living in the country illegally. But sometimes activists come to the agency's attention because of their work. Advocates say Moraviel-Pando's case and others documented in the report are textbook examples of retaliation. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was asked about similar allegations during an interview in April.
That is unacceptable. Retaliation in response to the constitutionally protected right of free speech, that's just unacceptable.
Immigrant advocates were glad to hear Mayorkas say that, but they want the administration to back those words up with action. They're calling on Mayorkas to take a formal stand against retaliation, and the official ICE enforcement guidelines is expected to issue in the next few months. Otherwise, activist Maru Moraviel-Pando worries the practice will continue.
I've always believed that when we get attacked, it's because they're afraid of us.
Since ICE started trying to deport her, activists in Washington succeeded in pushing the state to prohibit for-profit jails. They hope to shut down the ICE detention center in Tacoma by 2025. Moraviel-Pando says the agency's attempt to deport her backfired.
They gave us a larger microphone, a larger bullhorn to say this is wrong and this is why we're going to continue fighting.
Moraviel-Pando is still fighting her own deportation case and using whatever clout she has to help immigrants in detention. Joel Rose, NPR News.
To Michigan now, where the coronavirus infection rate has more than doubled in the past 2 weeks as the state's vaccination efforts have stalled. In response, some businesses are mandating customers to show proof of vaccinations before they can enter their establishments. Some policymakers and others are pushing back. From member station WKAR, Michelle Jokish-Polo reports.
It was just a few months ago that Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer happily announced the state would lift nearly all COVID-19 orders on July 1st.
We will be able to sing at church, dance at weddings, cheer at games, hug each other, and laugh together.
It was all lies, folks.
That is welcome news to so many.
It was all lies.
The number of people vaccinated has stalled at just below 63%, despite vaccines being more readily available. That poses a problem for Detroit nightclub owner Raphael Blake.
Yep.
He says since orders were lifted, it's become increasingly difficult for him to ensure those who are unvaccinated are wearing masks.
We still ask people who aren't vaccinated to wear masks, but there's no way to know who is and who is not vaccinated. And in reality, most people aren't wearing masks.
Friday was the first night the popular nightclub began asking paying customers to show proof of their COVID-19 vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test taken within 48 hours. Blake implemented the rule because of concerns about the spread of the Delta variant. But Republican State Senator Tom Barrett argues that what Blake is doing is discriminatory.
What if a business or establishment wanted to ask you for your, if you were HIV positive, you couldn't come into their establishment? I can't imagine you or anybody else would say that that's an acceptable form of discrimination.
Barrett is one of Michigan's
Good way to look at it.
lawmakers who voted for an amendment to the proposed state budget prohibiting Michigan from creating any type of vaccine passport. Brianne Danzig is a school bus driver in the suburbs of West Michigan. She also sees efforts to force disclosing vaccination status as discriminatory.
Why should we have to share that information when, according to the American with Disabilities Act, you can't ask someone what their disability is? It's the same idea, really.
The 41-year-old contracted COVID back in March and says she isn't interested in getting the vaccine anytime soon. But Lawrence Gostin, a director at the World Health Organization, says disclosing vaccine status is more about the collective health of a community than it's about individual choice.
We're doing that for sound scientific reasons, which is not only to protect the individual, him or herself, but also to protect family or neighbors.
Vaccine passports, it increases the for NPR News, I'm Michelle Jokishpolo.
Millions of people are facing a housing crisis that no extended eviction moratorium is likely to solve, and that's the cost of rent itself.
So with no change in salary, it's hard for you to be able to find affordable housing.
Contending with inflation and the rental market in a pandemic. That's tomorrow on All Things Considered. This is NPR News.
A sweltering summer in New England has some healthcare providers concerned.
We have decades of research that show that air conditioning is critical for survival for people at risk during heat waves.
And yet,
insurers don't cover it because they see it as not medically necessary.
A call to make cool air a public health priority and debate over who should provide it. On the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
Morning Edition with Tia Graham starts at 5 a.m. right here on Detroit's NPR station.
Next time on Detroit Today, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell will join to talk about infrastructure in Washington, and author Leidy Klotz will join to talk about his new book, Subtract: The Power of Less.
Tonight at 7 on 1019 WDET.
WDET is supported by the Belle Isle Art Fair, featuring juried artists, food trucks, and more. Jewelry, paintings, sculpture, and functional art this Saturday and Sunday at Belle Isle, located next to Scott Fountain. Information at belleisleartfair.com.
WDET Traffic is sponsored by the Michigan Design Center in Troy with 40 showrooms featuring furniture, lighting, tile, flooring, and designer referrals. We are looking at some delays in southbound I-275 as you approach E-Course Road because of that road construction there at I-94. 696 eastbound between Gratiot and 94, that is backed up. Northbound 75 is slow from Kniff all the way up through 696 because it's down to one lane, 696.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. The Biden administration is defending its decision to issue a temporary 60-day ban on evictions across much of the nation. As NPR's Windsor Johnston tells us, the White House shifted course after saying the president had no legal authority to extend the previous moratorium.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says President Biden would not have supported moving ahead with any action that lacked legal standing.
What was announced yesterday was not an extension of the existing moratorium. It was a more limited moratorium that was going to be helping areas that were hardest hit by COVID.
The CDC has issued the new ban on evictions for 60 days, citing the surge of new coronavirus infections driven by the Delta variant. President Biden has been sharply criticized on this by the left wing of his own party. The White House, meanwhile, says states need to distribute the billions they've already received to help renters and landlords. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
The highly transmissible Delta variant is driving up new COVID-19 cases in the U.S. to an average of about 90,000 a day. That's the most since mid-February. Hospitalization rates are surging to the highest levels since the pandemic began in states like Louisiana and Florida. Broward County Mayor Steve Geller says the first wave was older adults. Now they're seeing much younger people, patients in the hospital in Florida, even children who are unvaccinated.
It's catastrophic. Florida is currently around 24% of the national deaths. Our numbers are going up geometrically.
Mayor Geller says it's frustrating they can't set their own mask mandates because the Florida governor imposed a ban earlier this week, rolling back mask requirements for schools. You're listening to NPR News.
It's 4:32. Good afternoon. I'm Russ McNamara with news from WDET. Federal officials are coordinating disaster relief in southeast Michigan after June's flooding. As WDET's Eli Newman reports, members of Congress said the response has been swift.
Representative Brenda Lawrence says the Federal Emergency Management Agency is setting up recovery centers in Grosse Pointe and Detroit.
We also have Harper Woods. We are now moving to have a mobile unit in Hamtramck as well.
Representative Rashida Tlaib says Michigan's congressional delegation is working to fund infrastructure improvements.
That means dealing with the combined sewer system, dealing with the fact that we have a really drastic global issue regarding climate.
Officials with the Small Business Administration say they've approved nearly 200 loans in response to the flooding disaster for a near total of $6 million. That's on top of the $50 million in aid available for affected individuals. I'm Eli Newman, WDET News.
Proposal P, the ballot question to adopt a new city charter in Detroit, has been rejected by voters. The plan would have expanded city government, creating new departments and task forces on environmental justice, immigrant affairs, and reparations. Mayor Mike Duggan and many business interests in the city oppose Proposal P, citing financial concerns. Mayoral candidate Anthony Adams says opponents spent millions of dollars advertising to defeat the ballot question.
When you look at the fact that Proposal P had in Detroit's Bill of Rights, that was an aspirational document to protect the quality of health, the water affordability, and transportation. These are all things that people in the city of Detroit need.
Adams will face Duggan in the November general election. The crowds cheered and chanted as Dearborn mayoral candidate Abdullah Hammoud made remarks around 11:30 last night after winning the city's primary.
I take this opportunity and ask that we come together and that we unite, so we can move Dearborn forward together, so we can collectively build the Dearborn that we all know that our residents deserve, because that's why we're running. We're running because we believe we can tackle the tough issues.
Hammoud says residents want change when it comes to property taxes, poor air quality, and reckless driving. Ken Nelson will join incumbent Michael Taylor on the Sterling Heights mayoral ballot. Clear tonight, a low of 63. Sunny tomorrow, a high of 86. It's 4:35.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Raymond James, a firm focused on transforming lives, businesses, and communities through tailored wealth management, banking, and capital markets solutions. Learn more at raymondjames.com. From the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, supporting those working towards a day when no one has to choose between paying rent, putting food on the table, and protecting their health and the health of others. rwjf.org. And from the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. In Scotland today, newspaper headline shouted freedom, but read the small print. Another read, don't cry freedom. The headlines are a poke at Scotland's neighbor to the south. England declared so-called Freedom Day and lifted almost all COVID restrictions a few weeks ago. Scotland has charted a more cautious course. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says most COVID restrictions will be relaxed next Monday.
I don't like the term Freedom Day. I think to talk about freedom from an infectious virus or declaring victory over a virus is premature.
I spoke with Sturgeon today before a live audience as part of the Aspen Security Forum. We talked about the pandemic and about a freedom that Sturgeon very much does embrace, the push to free Scotland from the United Kingdom. Sturgeon ran and was re-elected this past spring on a promise to hold a new referendum on Scottish independence. I asked her, what's the timing?
I gave a commitment to the people of Scotland that my focus, as long as we are in this acute phase of COVID, is on getting us through that and into the recovery phase. But at the right time, when we're in the recovery, in order to equip ourselves best to recover economically and socially, Scotland should have that choice of becoming an independent country.
And I suppose that's why I'm asking, as you prepare to lift most restrictions, you're headed toward the recovery phase.
In the election, I said I would want to give people in Scotland that choice, and it is a choice, remember. I've got a very firm view of what I would like that choice to be, but it is a choice, and I would like to offer that choice in the first half of this term of our Parliament, which is, by the end of 2023, and we'll judge within that when the best time to offer that choice is. And I don't take these things for granted, but I'm pretty confident that when that choice is offered to the people of Scotland, partly because of our experience of being disregarded, not least on the issue of Brexit, since the last time we had this choice, I'm pretty confident people in Scotland will vote by majority to become an independent country. When we continue to be the best of friends and cooperate with the other parts of the UK, but can make our own way in the world and cooperate more fully with countries elsewhere.
Does it still feel like quite such a good idea, having seen how difficult it has been to disentangle the UK from the EU? An alliance that, a partnership that lasted mere decades. Untangling Scotland from the UK is decoupling an alliance that has endured and prospered for 300 years.
It's a very fair question, and I want to address it. In short, yes, I do still think it's a good idea. In fact, that view has been reinforced by Brexit, but we've also learned a lot from the Brexit process. Those who argued for Brexit did no preparation, they did no planning, they did no thinking about what Brexit meant in practice. So when the UK-wide vote was for the UK to leave the EU, nobody had a clue what it meant. Nobody had a clue how to take that referendum result and turn it into practice. And so the whole process was chaotic. And that's why the process of, to use your word, disentanglement became so vexed and so difficult in the Brexit context. I would never want to put forward such an unprepared, underprepared perspective for Scottish independence.
You're saying that the Brexit experience does not give you pause because you would be doing more planning and have
Does that mean we don't look at that and think, well, how do we make sure we don't make the same mistake? Does it remind us that no process like this is straightforward or easy, and we shouldn't pretend to people that it is? There will be challenges and hurdles and pretty difficult problems that we have to solve along the way. But the benefits, I think, will be significant. It doesn't mean that Scotland as a country doesn't face challenges or problems, but it puts finding the solutions to these problems in our own hands.
Why has support for independence dropped from the historic high last year? Something like 58% of Scots were in favour. It's a little lower now.
We see fluctuation, and I think we reached a particular high point. It's dipped a bit since then, but it is still if we look at this in the historical sweep, at historically high levels. When people in Scotland voted the last time, and I said a moment ago, Scotland wants independence, of course, when people in Scotland voted for it the last time, a majority voted against that, and 45% voted for it. All polls show now that support for independence is higher. Amongst the younger age groups in Scotland, it is, in some opinion polls, as high as 70% support for Scottish independence. But I don't take that for granted. The case has still to be argued and won, because Scotland will only become independent if a majority votes for it, not because I want it or my party wants it. We have to convince people that it is the best future for the country.
Yeah. Let me turn you to the security implications of this. Given that Scotland's national security and foreign policy has been coordinated through London these past, centuries, from a purely security perspective,
man, did you see that motorhome? I thought it was like Rich Life when he had to take all the Rich Life stickers off.
I think the UK has...
It literally said, follow me on social media. But I couldn't make out what it said.
The short answer is no.
He's behind us, folks.
I would see an independent Scotland as
it's kind of crazy. I wonder where he's going.
A multilateralist partner in the international
He's back
stage.
there. He's coming down the road.
We talk about nationalist
pretty interesting.
Movements. People think about,
I don't know, man. I wonder if we got. I think I got it.
The reverse is true. In Scotland, I partly want Scotland to be independent so that we can play a better role in the world. The rest of the UK would continue to be our closest neighbour, obviously geographically, and therefore our closest friend and ally, and the need for us
to sneaking in the back door to Taco Bell.
Secure all of us would be real. We also, and this is not
maybe I'll catch the red light.
in
He'll
my
get up
party,
here.
We would want to be members of NATO.
Check it out.
We would see our role in the world as positive, constructive, multilateralist,
don't let these people be
and
like, he could have won.
in creating a more secure
Here it comes.
and fairer and more peaceful world, and that I think is a role that should be welcomed across the rest of the world.
Man, they were hauling.
What does the special relationship look like? If Scotland's relationship with the rest of the United
It looked like a
Kingdom
blur, but
fundamentally
damn, I catch him at the next light.
The United States would continue to be the closest friends.
I'm in the damn turning lane.
The links, family, business, cultural, between Scotland and the
they're in the
United
right.
States
I don't know where they're going.
long-standing, and
I might have caught it. We'll see.
Well into the future, and I'm glad to see that I think we've got better relations with the current.
I hope you all enjoyed the ride, folks.
Than we perhaps did
Later,
with the
dudes.
recent one, but Scotland will be a constructive player on the international